Good morning. Welcome to the worship service of the First Unitarian Church of Hobart, Indiana. My name is Patricia Riley Chirilla. My pronouns are she and her, and I participate in the life of the church by being on the worship committee and volunteering wherever else I can lend a hand. We are a religious community of people with diverse beliefs and shared values. Our diverse beliefs are expressed in our 6 sources, and our shared values are expressed in our 7 principles, both of which can be found online at uua.org. Together, we strive to grow spiritually, build community, and live our values in the world. Today is a special day here at First Unitarian, as this is the first service being led by our new minister, Pastor Tom Bozeman. Please join. Well, I would say please join us in welcoming him to our beloved community, but you've done that well, thank you. We are looking forward to working with him to help guide us as we engage in the work of this vital congregation. We are currently streaming our services online. The Joys and Sorrows portion of our service, however, is private, and we will take a break from streaming during that part of the service. The sermon portion of the service will be recorded and will be available for future viewing on Facebook, YouTube, and the church website. Due to the high transmissibility of the latest COVID variant, we suggest the wearing of masks by in-person attendees. If you do not have a mask, we can supply you with one. And I believe that Pete has a live announcement.
Saturday, we're on the verge of actually making history. Thanks a lot to this church, the May 22nd meeting of 160 people, of which 17 of you were there. There is an ordinance in Gary now for mobile mental health. The final big meeting is this Tuesday at 5:30. At 4:30, some of us will be here at the church to give anybody a ride there who needs a ride. We really need people in the seats. There is an ordinance. The Gary City Council is behind it. It's a model for the whole region. You dial 988, and the police, instead of the police, you get a mobile mental health van. But the critical thing this Tuesday is some people want to reduce the amount from $1 million for the pilot program, from $1.5 million to $1 million. So we really need $1.5 million to make it work right. Please help on Tuesday. I'll have flyers after.
Now, please take a deep breath, and then another, and join us in the spirit of reverence.
If you would, join me in lighting the chalice. We gather this hour as people of faith with joys and sorrows, gifts and needs. We light this beacon of hope, sign of our quest for truth and meaning in celebration of a life we share together.
Opening words are from number 434 in our hymnals. May we be reminded here of our highest aspirations and inspired to bring our gifts of love and service to the altar of humanity. May we know once again that we are not isolated beings, but connected in mystery and miracle to the universe, to this community, and to each other. And now, anybody that's able and willing, please stand for our opening hymn, number 348, Guide My Feet. Please remain standing for the affirmation of faith. Love is the doctrine of this church. The quest for truth is its sacrament. Service is its prayer. And this is our covenant, to dwell together in peace, to seek the truth in love, and to help one another. While we are striving to create a worship space which is both spiritual and safe, however, we recognize that not everyone can attend in person. We extend a special welcome to anyone who is joining us virtually today. Thank you to our tech team for making the live screening and recording possible. For those present in the sanctuary, please take a moment to greet your neighbors by waving your hands and letting the warmth of your smile fill the spaces between us. Please join me in the doxology.
So each week in many Unitarian Universalist congregations, we share joys, sorrows, concerns, milestones with one another, and in sharing them, we knit our community that much more close. So does anybody have a joy or a sorrow, a concern, a milestone you'd like to share with us this morning? I'll come and bring the mic to you.
And now we will have a rite of membership. When I call your name, please come up. Sally Rempus. Just stand right here. Bob Overland. Do you both have a copy of your thing? Okay. The act of becoming a member of this church is both simple and bold. Writing your name in the membership book. A public statement of a private inner reality that you have found this to be your religious home. Joining is easy, but membership is not. Because a member accepts responsibility for continuing and sharing the faith journey that brought you to this place, and for living in covenant with others whose journeys may be different. Now will you please read number 474 in unison out loud.
On unto the Church Universal, which is the depository of all ancient wisdom and the school of modern thought, which recognizes in all prophets a harmony, in all scriptures a unity, and through all dispensations a community, a continuity, which abjures all the separates and divides, and always magnifies all that unifies and brings peace, which seeks truth in freedom, justice in love, and individual discipline in social duty, and which shall make all the sects, classes, nations, and races one global community. Unto this church and unto all its members, known and unknown throughout the world, we pledge the allegiance of our hands and hearts.
Thank you. And now, while I watch you sign the book, Carla will do a reading with the congregation, a give and take. Number 474, right? 442. 442, sorry, they did. Carla?
Thank you.
We bid you welcome, who come with weary spirit seeking rest. We bid you welcome, who come with hope in your heart. We bid you welcome, who are seekers of a new faith. We bid you welcome, who enter this hall as a homecoming. Whoever you are, whatever you are, wherever you are on your journey, we bid you welcome. We will be the first to welcome you.
I just have a couple more things. I'd like to welcome Pastor Tom. And this is for our president of the board, Sandy. She has done so much for us, and it's her birthday in a couple days. And finally, there are two people in our congregation that has really brought us out into the community this past year and done a wonderful job in organizing and being in the community. Pete O'Day. Where's Michelle? Michelle Farrell. Thank you for all you do.
Well, that made me a little bit weepy. I'm going to do the story for the child in each of us. The title is The Castle Door, an original tale. Once, long ago, in a distant land, a prince was riding through a deep forest far from his home with his company of soldiers, looking for new lands to conquer. Quite suddenly, he came upon a clearing in the trees. There before him stretched a meadow leading to a glorious hill. Meadow and hill were covered with blossoming trees, bushes, and wildflowers. At the top of the hill was a castle that seemed made of pure gold. It sparkled so in the sunlight that the prince was nearly blinded. Fascinated, the prince signaled to his regiment, and together they rode closer and closer and up the hill toward the castle. The birds sang sweetly. The perfume of flowers was lovely. As they drew near the castle, he saw a window open for a moment in the wall, and a face appeared, a face that shone more brilliantly than the sun, and yet more gently than any flower. Then it was gone. Instantly, he fell in love. He knocked upon the castle door. "Who is there?" came a voice softer than the bluest sky. "It is I, Prince Rindelhart. I am known throughout the land for my bravery. My armies are the strongest. My castle is but 2 days' ride from here. May I please come and be with you?" "There's only room for one of us here," was the reply. The prince rode away in dejection. He traveled around through 7 kingdoms, fighting dragons, escaping from dungeons, taking land. Everywhere he went, he was a hero. And yet the praise meant nothing, for everywhere he went, he thought only of the shining light of his beloved and of her words, "There's only room for one of us here." Finally, in his desperation, he sought the wisdom of a wise woman. "Perhaps your armies intimidate her," she suggested. "Of course," he thought. He returned to the castle alone and knocked upon the door. "Who is there?" came the sweet voice. "It is I, the prince, alone," he replied humbly. "There's only room for one of us here," said the sweet voice. He went away again, dejected and confused. He roamed the wilderness for some years until he met a famous wizard. "Perhaps she cannot know you with all of your armor and weaponry," he suggested. "Oh, of course," said the prince. So he returned and laid down his armor, his shield, and his sword. He walked humbly to the castle door and knocked. "Who is there?" asked the voice. "It is I, your humble servant, no soldier, just a man. There's only room for one of us here," came the reply. For 7 more years, the prince wandered alone in the wilderness, forsaking his kingdom, thinking only of his beloved. He sought wisdom only from the stars and the sky and the wildness inside him. Finally, one day, the prince returned to the castle on the hill. He had no armies, no armor, no horse. He walked up the hill, past the bushes heavily laden with the fruit of fall, and knocked upon the door. "Who is there?" came the sweet voice. The prince took a breath and said, "It is thou." And the door was opened for him.
Please remain seated for the middle hymn in your teal hymnal, number 1011. We will sing it through 3 times in unison.
Good morning, everybody. So I typically preach in 5-week series, and this time through, these first couple series are going to be a bit linked to each other. And so broadly, August and early September, we'll be talking about reflection and self-examination. And then late September into October, we'll be talking about setting intentions for the coming year, taking any action to resolve whatever is lingering from the past. And so in our society, this sort of process of looking back and looking forward often happens at the turn of the Gregorian calendar, from one year to the next. In Judaism, there is a different mind frame, one that I think fits congregational life quite well. The time for such self-examination is when things are still warm, when there's still a lot of light in the sky, but gradually less and less. We're already headed toward the winter months. Of course, historically, the weather patterns that inspired this process were a bit different. The Hebrews were a desert people, and this was the driest time of year. And so this was the time when one should take account of one's relationship with the deity that might decide whether there is enough water to drink or enough to grow the food. But for our purposes, in our time and place, the fact that we are headed toward the cold months, when we will huddle indoors, when the scope of our attention and awareness might naturally drift inward, and the fact that the congregational year is getting going again after a usually lighter summer season means that now is a good time for us to take account of our relationship with the world, with one another, with ourselves, to settle up accounts before the natural world starts to feel less hospitable to us. Indeed, both Jews and many pagans celebrate the new year in the fall, just as Jews consider the day to begin not at midnight, not at some arbitrary time on a clock, but rather at sunset, at the time when we take a break from having access to the life-giving energy of the sun. At one point, I was working with a life coach, and he suggested that I similarly think of starting my day at sunset. In order to keep from staying up late and trying to seize more of the day, that can be such a temptation in our society to not want the day to end, to soak up as much of the evening as possible. And so he said, why not think about tomorrow as starting at sunset? That everything that happens after that, maybe doing the dishes, maybe going for a walk in the neighborhood, maybe puttering about and tidying up the apartment, that those things are the first small steps of whatever grand plans I have for the morning. And so I tried it, and I fell in love with that approach. In that natural quiet and thoughtfulness of the evening, I found the perfect place of centering, of mindfulness, of relaxed perspective, to hold all the beauty and the gratitude and the regret and the joy of the day just ending, and bringing all of that to resolution in preparation for going to sleep and for the day just beginning, holding that centering as the touchstone for that day just beginning that would hold me into the morning when the rush of the world starts to churn. That tendency in our society is to lean into more and more and more. This constant rush of the new to catch your attention. The next thing to be concerned about, to be outraged about, to be excited by. If we're not careful, we can find ourselves getting swept up in it all, losing our own center, getting swept up in that whirlwind. And certainly, given the news out of the state legislature in recent days, there are extremely important things going on in the world that do call for action. I do hope folks go on Tuesday night. That is an especially valuable thing locally. But if we never slow down enough to take stock of how things are going within our own lives, we'll miss out on our chance to course correct. We'll miss out on our chance to make whatever small adjustments might point us in the direction that we truly want to go. We can find ourselves 10 years down the line having made little difference and with no energy left to give. Or if in our romantic relationships we don't ever take the time to soberly take stock of where we are and where we want to go together, we can find ourselves 20 years down the line unhappily or just listlessly going through the motions. Or if in our professional lives we don't ever take the time to soberly take stock of where we are and where we want to go, we can similarly find ourselves 20 years down the line stuck in unsatisfying drudgery or feeling deeply unfulfilled. So taking some time each year to really dial things in, to assess where we are and what in us is true, is of the utmost value. That inmost part of us, that part that speaks with a still small voice, that unless we intentionally take the time and space to listen carefully to it, can be hard to hear amid the rush and the push of daily life. That is what one might call one's soul. And when we give that quiet, wise part of us, that our soul, more space to just stretch out, to inform how we live our lives from moment to moment, there's an easefulness and a wholeness to be found there. For we Unitarian Universalists, we can do this collectively with our practice of covenant. The concept of covenant we inherit from our Jewish and Christian ancestors. For we Unitarian Universalists, it has a somewhat distinct meaning. In the Jewish Tanakh or the Christian Old Testament, covenant is a binding agreement between God and the Hebrews that to our 21st century U.S. sensibilities can seem like God just imposed on the people. But to our Congregationalist religious ancestors, covenant was the glue that held everything together, that gave form and purpose to a religious community coming together in the first place, and intentionally directed its efforts going forward. When our Congregationalist ancestors came to North America from England, they set about intentionally crafting their new communities. No longer needing to be so concerned with the hierarchy of the Church of England, they could direct their own efforts to whatever felt most true for them. They might meet every week to discuss, and then reflect over that following week, and then discuss again, and repeat that process for an entire year, discerning together what promises they might make to each other. And then based upon the foundation of that thoughtful consideration, they could hold each other accountable going forward, hold one another to what they had said they had wanted. Now, when we think about holding people accountable, it can sound like punishment. Because in our society, that's often how we talk about it, holding people accountable for what they've done. But really, that's precisely what a good friend does, hold us to our best selves. If there's a habit that we have that in any way makes us smaller or less generous or less ourselves, a good friend will intervene and remind us of what is most important to us. In the words of the poet David White, through the eyes of another, we receive a greater sense of our own personhood, one we can aspire to, the one in whom they have most faith. Friendship is a moving frontier of understanding, not only of the self, but also of the other, and of a possible and as yet unlived future. In our story this morning, the prince could tell that there was something enticing, something interesting about that castle. And he circled back to it over and over again. And it was only when he had finally shorn himself of all that was clouding his personhood, of that which made him smaller, of that which obscured and lessened his pure humanity, that he was able to come down to his deeper self. In covenantal relationships like those we have in UU congregations, we get to support one another on that journey. And when we get into late September, we can start getting deeper into the promises that we make to one another, into supporting one another on our journeys. But for now, for this particular series, we'll be focusing on your awareness of what is true for you. This is the foundational layer on which all else we might do in the world comes to fruition. And if we get so right with ourselves and with one another, our movements can become infused with the power of purposefulness and intention. Unitarian architect, systems theorist, writer, designer, inventor, philosopher, and futurist Buckminster Fuller once said that Freud was the most important figure of the 20th century for one reason: because he had introduced the single great idea upon which all the significant developments of the 20th century rested, that the invisible is more important than the visible. Paying attention to what surges in our depths is one of the most important things we can do. As writer and psychoanalyst Clarissa Pinkola Estes wrote, "Ours is not the task of fixing the entire world all at once, but of stretching out to mend the part of the world that is within our reach. Any small, calm thing that one soul can do to help another soul, to assist with some portion of this poor, suffering world, will help immensely. It is not given to us to know which acts or by whom will cause the critical mass to tip toward an enduring good. What is needed for dramatic change is the accumulation of acts, adding to, adding more, continuing. We know that it does not take everyone on earth to bring justice and peace, but only a small, determined group who will not give up during the first, second, or 100th gale. One of the most calming and powerful actions you can do," she writes, "to intervene in a stormy world is to stand up and show your soul. Soul on deck shines like gold in dark times. The light of the soul throws sparks, can send up flares, builds signal fires, causes proper matters to catch fire. To display the lantern of the soul in shadowy times like these, to be fierce and to show mercy toward others, both are acts of immense bravery and actually necessity. Struggling souls catch light from other souls who are fully lit and willing to show it. If you would help to calm the tumult, this is one of the strongest things you can do." In the words of Buddhist Rabbi Alan Liu, this season entails a journey from denial to awareness, from self-deception to judgment, from self-hatred to self-forgiveness, from anger to healing, from hard-heartedness to brokenheartedness, from boredom and staleness to renewal, wherein we confront our shadow and come to embrace it, come to know our deepest desires and catch a glimpse of where they come from, express the paradoxical miracle of our own being and the infinite power of simply being present, journeying from little mind to big mind, from confinement in the ego to a sense of ourselves as a part of something larger, from isolation to a sense of our intimate connection to all being, wherein we discover ourselves to be part of an inevitable chain of circumstances. This journey is one of self-discovery, of spiritual discipline, of self-forgiveness, of spiritual evolution. This is the great journey of all human beings that we must all take across the world, from birth to death and back to renewal again. One of the things we learn in the course of the long journey home is to keep our eye on the ball, on the starting point, on the things in life that are essential and that sustain us. One of the ways our lives heal us is to teach us this. I have a couple of closing stories for you, one of which is about Alfred Nobel, the inventor of dynamite. One day his older brother died, and a newspaper got the story wrong and printed Alfred's obituary instead. And so Alfred opened the paper that morning and had the unusual experience of reading his own obituary while he was still alive. Dr. Alfred Nobel, who became rich by finding ways to kill more people faster than ever before, died yesterday. The obituary began. And so Alfred threw down the paper. "That's not how I want to be remembered," he said. "That's not what's important to me," he said. And right then and there, he decided to throw his entire fortune into rewarding people for bettering the world and bringing it closer to peace. Secondly, a story from Rabbi Laura Zell, who tells of a visit she once made to her 95-year-old grandmother at an old age home in Boston. Rabbi Geller had brought pictures of her family to show her grandmother, of the great-grandchildren her grandmother barely knew. A husband she had only met a few times, but the time passed very quickly, and far too soon it was time to go. And as Rabbi Geller stood to leave, her grandmother said, "I want to give you something. What can I give you?" Her world had become continuously smaller as she had aged. She'd outlived her husband, all of her siblings, most of her friends, even a grandchild. She'd moved from a lovely home to a spacious apartment to a single room in a nursing home. All her furniture and most of her possessions had long since been distributed to her grandchildren. So what was there left to give? Rabbi Geller writes, "With great ceremony, she signaled her aide to open the top drawers and bring forward a box. In it were several silk scarves, once beautiful but now yellowed with age. And here," she said, "I want you to have these." I started to protest that I didn't wear scarves, but suddenly I understood. She just wanted me to take something of her with me, back to my life so far away in California, back to those great-grandchildren she barely knew. She wanted to accompany me in some way, to protect me like she used to when I was little, and she wanted to make sure I would remember her after she was gone. Rabbi Geller's grandmother was a woman well healed by life. The passage of time had reduced her to her essential nature. And this is what she passed on to her granddaughter in the form of a worn scarf. Little by little, her house and then all her possessions had been stripped away, and little by little, her life had carried her home, returned her to a sense of what was most important. It takes the living of a whole life, a life and a death, a complete journey, to learn that. We are all making that journey. This time of the year is a dress rehearsal for it, a time when we are all stripped down, a time that gives us an intimation of what this long, strange journey home is all about. The passage of time. Another year, like our life, like our death, heals us, carries us home, makes us whole, gives us a sense of what is important in life. So ends the story of Rabbi Zell's grandmother. We will go more in depth on these matters in coming weeks, but for this next week, from now until next Sunday, I invite you to reflect on two questions. One of which is, how do you want to be remembered? And the other of which is, what is most important? How do you want to be remembered? And what is most important? may we embark on this journey home, to the home of our soul, to what is most important in life, to our own healing, to our capacity to support others in their healing. May we be reminded of our highest aspirations and inspired to bring our gifts of love and service to the altar of humanity. May we know once again that we are not isolated beings, but connected in mystery and miracle to the universe, to this community, and to each other. May we find such wholeness within ourselves and within each other that we are renewed. And in our renewing, we renew others as well. May it be so. Amen.
Thank you, Pastor Tom. I'm sure I speak for others when I say that you've given us a lot to ponder and think about and connect with and over in the next week. And we're excited about the new journey that we're undertaking. Now is the time in our service for our offering. We give to remind ourselves of how many gifts we have to offer. We give to remember that we are part of something bigger than ourselves. We give because we believe in music and friendship. We give with that faith, with the faith that together we have enough. The money in the baskets goes to sustaining the mission of our community. The money in the cups goes to our Faith and Action Ministry and different charities chosen by the ministry every month. For the month of August, the Faith and Action Ministry has chosen the Chicago Abortion Fund as its recipient for Loose Change for Social Change. Since this is the first Sunday of the month, I'm going to take a moment to explain what this organization does and how its mission is grounded in our mission. The Chicago Abortion Fund provides financial, logistical, and emotional support to people seeking abortion care in our Midwest region. They have been doing this good work since 1985, 37 years. They support not just people coming to Illinois for care, but also those staying in their home states around the Midwest, including Indiana. In the first 3 months of 2022, over 80% of the Chicago Abortion Fund grantees came from outside of Illinois. They hear from over 500 people a month seeking support accessing abortion care. They provide funding for appointments, wraparound and practical supports like gas money, lodging, childcare, and food. They support pregnant people with clinic selection, insurance counseling, and other essential logistical considerations, and they stay with callers every step of the way. In response to the Dobbs decision, the head of our Unitarian Universalist Association, the Reverend Dr. Susan Frederick Gray, has said, quote, "The overwhelming majority of Unitarian Universalists UUs support keeping abortion legal in all or most cases. This is rooted in our principles and our core religious beliefs that affirm gender equity. It also reflects a moral commitment to the idea that reproductive care is health care and is essential to the well-being of individuals and families. Unitarian Universalists are committed to reproductive justice, a framework created by Black women in the 1980s and 90s, which affirms the human right to have children, not to have children, to parent the children one has in healthy environments, to safeguard bodily autonomy, and to express one's sexuality freely. The UU faith has a long history of collaborating in this movement and advocating for safe, legal, accessible abortion care," unquote. Please consider donating to the Chicago Abortion Fund today and every Sunday in August in the metal cups. For those not here with us today, there is an online link on the screen for both one-time and regular donations. If I may please have 4 volunteers to come forward to carry the baskets and cups, it would be appreciated. for your prayers, your presence, your service, and your gifts. We are truly grateful. Our closing hymn today is number 1064, Blue Boat Home, in our teal hymnals. It is a standard of Unitarian Universalism. So please join me and rise in body and spirit as you are able and sing with gusto 1064, Blue Boat Home. Thank you, Jeremy.
The closing words are number 712 by Romans 12. Do not be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your minds. Please join me in extinguishing the chalice. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again. Okay. Coffee and conversation